Hey guys, welcome to this episode of Context is King. I'm Rebecca Brayton, and with me as always is WatchMojo founder and CEO Ashkan Karbasfrooshan to answer some viewer questions. Okay. So
as always. That's a bit of shade there, as always.
No,
I'm kidding.
There's no shade. Well, there is shade. Wait for it. You spoke at Collision recently, and we got a question from Stacey Ntongo, who saw you there. Actually, she has 5 questions. They are enumerated point by point, some of which are a little bit shady in my opinion, but we'll start.
I'm a masochist. Bring it on.
As WatchMojo is specifically known for top 10 categories, how do you ensure that your fans aren't bored of the repetitive content and expected content structure?
Fair enough.
So basically, I think a lot of her questions have to do with keeping fresh and keeping people
innovating.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, I think there's a general answer and then there's a YouTube answer, and we've kind of alluded to it. So the general answer is, whether you are a steakhouse or whether you are McDonald's, you could run very successful operations with a very devoted clientele. And you have to be careful that if you are Smith & Wollensky, you don't all of a sudden try to out McDonald's. And if you're McDonald's, you don't try to kind of become Smith & Wollensky, because that generally will not work. You're going to alienate the people that come to you, right? Like, I love sushi, I love steak, I love Szechuan, love all kinds.
I like
you see where this is
pizza.
going. No, I love all kinds of food, but there's sometimes I'm going into an establishment for something precise. So,
by the way, I know McDonald's had pizza.
McDonald's had pizza. Yeah.
I know.
It was okay for what it was, for McDonald's pizza. So, the answer specifically is, I've said it that like Wayne's World, Dave Letterman, Moses, the OG of top 10 lists, the top 10 format has always existed. YouTube is always getting newer audiences, younger audiences. Our audience has kind of aged with us and evolved with us. So both the existing audience wants good top 10s, and newer audiences are coming on, and they're always going to be drawn to the top 10 format because it's a known entity. There's that payoff where you want to know what's number one. So you got to stay true to that. I always like the idea of keeping audiences guessing. We had this recent discussion where I wanted to do top 10 races. I wanted to do top 10 races and actually have the audience think that we were going to kind of go in and talk about white people and black people, and we weren't. We were going to actually do the F1.
This is a whole other episode.
I know, but it's important to go, like, to me, it would have just been a straight up. Now, in this era, the reason I balked wasn't actually because some people would have been offended, because clearly we're ranking top 10, 100-meter dash, the splash and dash swimming, the biggest marathon, but because I said, you know what, it's true, some people would say that's clickbait. And I always said we don't do clickbait. If it's top 10 skyscrapers, it's top 10 skyscrapers. It's not top 10 phallic objects coming out of the ground, And I felt that in 2019 would be viewed as clickbait, so I didn't do it. But the spirit of it was, our audience would be like, hell yeah, this is why I come to WatchMojo, because every day there's something new. And it could be top 10 burgers, top 10 pizzas, and not just top 10 Avengers movies. So I think that's the way you do it, that you realize that at the end of the day, yes, we are trying to experiment and expand, and I think that's one of our follow-up questions. But at the end of the day, people are coming to us for top 10. So you got to serve that historical audience that likes a good top 10 list, and you got to be the best at it without the bullshit of clickbait. But you also got to stay true to the people that have been with you for almost a decade now and give them what they want. So that one is easy because you got to stay true to what it is that you are known for.
Yeah, it's like new menu items at McDonald's, but you keep the same old burger. Well, I'll skip ahead to the one that you alluded to. So is WatchMojo planning on expanding into other ventures such as educational programs, AI, VR, or other implementations? If not, do you not feel that the brand would therefore reach its prime in which the content on WatchMojo may disinterest the audience?
Well, we've already done, we used to be educational, like we used to.
I think we're still educational.
No, we are still educational, but not all of our videos are equally educational, right? I mean, that's what I mean. Like, we used to do The Rise of Hitler, which was hardcore educational, but even things like our videos of like the biography of Beyonce, again, Pearson, Cengage Nelson would use that, because if you could translate that to any language, when you say Jay-Z, a word Beyonce, the audience knows the context and says, ooh, marriage, spouse, I get it, right? So our videos are generally educational. I think the challenge is, my earlier point I didn't get into, is the YouTube, which is YouTube, and this is something I don't like about YouTube, but I accept it. YouTube is really, really very vertical and niche. You really got to go deeper. And that's something I struggle with. Thankfully, I'm not a creator in the sense of other creators where they get burnout in that sense. God knows I have my issues with YouTube. But what I don't like is you got to stay to your niche vertical if you want it to succeed. I have so many interests, right? I mean, that's ultimately the difference between
It's basically the opposite of our MO.
Yeah, that's it. Like, I would be so varied where, like, let's say NBC Network, you get SNL News and different shows to serve a wider audience, and you wouldn't watch every video that we publish, but you watch a couple and whatnot. And that's where the challenge is. So, Stacy, I kept calling her Jenny. Stacy, what we've done is that we've launched Context because putting this show on WatchMojo wouldn't resonate. We have Unveiled, which is a very science-y vertical. We're doing things in VR. We did something with Cirque du Soleil. We did something with YouTube. They wanted to promote VR along with Cirque du Soleil and others. So we've experimented with VR. On Snap, we're going to do different things. On LinkedIn, we're going to do different things. We are probably, we're in out of home. So I think my presentation at Collision was about fairly narrow 15 minutes, zoomed in on WatchMojo. But if you kind of zoom out, let's call it Mojo Supreme, bring that back, I think there's a lot more. WatchMojo is like an iceberg, meaning there's a lot that a person will see above of the water level, but underneath it, there's this whole other thing. So as we keep satisfying our core demo, we've been doing all this other stuff. And I would say we started off doing a lot. We narrowed it down to kind of find our voice. And then once we achieved a certain amount of success, we've expanded. And I think the challenge is, people could criticize us, is we don't really want to stay that niche. And that's a struggle and challenge because YouTube rewards people that are like really, really niche. Here's 57 videos on Game of Thrones. I'd rather have some diversity. I like variety, personally.
Well, I feel like you kind of touched on another question. I'm just really jumping around. So recently, Instagram and Facebook crashed for an entire day, and businesses who built their brand on these platforms were mostly affected. So since we're so active on YouTube, do you feel like there's an over-dependency on a platform that essentially establishes your brand?
Absolutely, but you can't be a hypocrite, meaning I am very grateful as an entrepreneur and founder to have such a team of wonderful people. I have 75 people, maybe more even if you include freelancers. It's not just out of like my intellect and skills, it's because of YouTube fundamentally. So that comes with the territory. Now, yes, I think we are in a bit of a different spot versus most creators who are maybe too reliant on themselves, where we've historically had companies that have come to me and said, look, we would love it if what you're doing on YouTube, like we did it for our platform. How do you feel about that? And I'm the one that's been very loyal to YouTube, not just because of the management at YouTube, but not because of the audience on YouTube and the fans and that kind of gratification. And that's very addictive, I find, So we've been very, very true to YouTube. Now, if God forbid YouTube disappeared or we disappeared, don't shut us down, Susan. If that happened, it would suck, but I think we would just be able to fairly quickly reinvent ourselves. But not all platforms are the same. I've covered this. Facebook, its core belief is screw the world, give us all your money, or we'll give you Trump. Whereas whereas Google has always believed in sending out traffic. Now, Google has this kind of, I want to be polite, but it's basically this kind of arrogant, through their dominance, view that like, well, we have a monopoly effectively on advertising and all this search and even video. But I do think that they at least believe that, well, the ecosystem has to be successful and healthy, so we'll share revenue. They basically early on did this. And again, we've touched on this in other shows. So while there is always platform risk on YouTube is here, platform risk on Facebook is here. And by the way, this is like burning in a fire. So Facebook is much riskier is the point I'm making.
Right. Okay, so there's one, okay. As your brand specializes in creating content on pop culture topics, do you ever feel like your brand loses authenticity because your audience expects these conversational and trending topics, but your brand is not able to create content regarding social justice and politics, for instance, because of the dependency on the consumer's preferences? So that is a good question because I do struggle with that a little bit.
Well, look, every time we've tried to touch on those things on WatchMojo, our audience has been like, talk to the hand, but to be fair, that's a vocal minority. And that's the difference, again, that like a sensible, sane professional has to just say, whoa, there's a vocal minority. 90% of the people watch this didn't even comment. 5% commented or engaged, and maybe 1 or 2% vocally said no. we talked about why is it that like when you go to Berkeley, but not just Berkeley, even Harvard or anywhere, any college, you get a lot of like the vocal minority are like the crazy lefties, the social justice warriors. I'm playing to the stereotype, not believing that. But then online, the vocal minority are like the guys who are voting for Trump and wearing the MAGA hats, right? So I think that's just more of a sociology. And in our upcoming documentary, Fox in the Henhouse, oh yeah, it's happening. I talked to Emma Vigeland of the Young Turks about that dynamic, and it's interesting, her vantage point, because their audience is almost very different and similar to ours for different reasons, and that's a whole other show. But the point I want to make is, again, this is why we have context. This is why if you were to follow me on Twitter, you see that like there's different things that we cover. But yes, WatchMojo is successful because of some things, so we have to be careful, right? I mean, it's the audience is voting with their watch time. And we have to respect that they want certain things. And if all of a sudden I came out, like we did an interview with Spike Lee, where I talked to him about entrepreneurship, movie making, and race in America. We put it on context because it fit on context. If it would have been for WatchMojo, he was not in the mood to give me his 5 favorite movies. That interview would not have lasted very long, and it only lasted 6 minutes to begin with. So I think that's when you start to kind of diversify and experiment and move into different verticals and platforms as well. But it is a struggle. But it's a struggle if you want it to be, because we could tomorrow start talking about the abortion issues. We could talk about the LGBTQ's, struggles for human rights and whatnot.
Well, I think we found more success with stuff like that on Ms. Mojo.
Absolutely. But even Miss Mojo is not militantly going out there.
No.
We cover it under an entertainment lens. But look, I look at media as decades and decades as a going concern, whereas a lot of people look at it as, well, this is what I'm doing now. So we may eventually go back and be, I think if you would have looked at where my state of mind was when I was in college and even early in my career, it's a coincidence that I landed in entertainment. It could have been that I would have gone into law, poli-sci, been a lot more, covering politics and government. It just so happened that I channeled my interest for music and movies and TV shows into WatchMojo.
Right. All right, the last question is kind of a general one, but now that you're an established entrepreneur, what are any pieces of advice or lessons that you would tell yourself years before your success?
Okay, so the general one is the whole persistence. So if it's to myself, I think it's good that I will always have something to prove. I'm having this athlete mentality. You never want to be like, oh, I scored 50 goals last year. No, I want to score 100 this year. I want to win every game this year. So I think that I would keep. What I wish I would have learned sooner is, don't give a damn about a lot of the noise that's out there. You're not going to please everybody. You shouldn't please everybody. It's perfectly fine. If there's somebody said, Steve Spurrier, former coach, college football, Florida Gators, he goes, if everybody likes you, it's because they're beating you and because they don't fear you and because you're basically, not PC, a P-U-S-S-Y, a pussy. He said it.
He said that?
I don't think he said it. But he did not say that, but that's the point that he was making, right? And this was a long time ago when you could talk like that and not lose your coaching job, or I don't know who's going to fire me. But the point is, that's what I wish I would have known. That is, what? Don't be cocky. Don't be arrogant. Confidence is good, but that line between confidence and arrogance is very, blurry. But who cares? You're not going to please everybody. What you have to do. You have to ask a lot of questions, but just do that. And I think, it's funny, Rich Antoniello, who I know, founder of Complex, we talk about him on the show, love the guy, known him for 10 years. He goes, recently on Twitter, he was like, what age were you when you finally realized to drown out that noise, essentially? And we haven't covered it yet on Tackling Twitter. And I was going to joke saying I haven't figured it out yet, but it wasn't true. It was basically in the last 2 years I went through that. And maybe it was because I turned 40, I'm 41 now. It was because of other reasons. But if I could go back to 20, I would say don't lose that kind of humility and hard work and that work ethic. But the sooner you realize that 99% of what's out there is noise and not really helpful or constructive, and even some of it at worst resentful and envious and jealousy and petty, I would have probably, I would have hair like you right now, maybe. That's unlikely.
Oh, boy. All right. Well, if you guys have any questions for us, be sure to leave them in the comments. But otherwise, we will see you next time.